So I'm doing a little bit of a Q&A night. I just kind of want to mix things up and, you know, keep things a little upbeat and lively and be talking about the things I love, because really I do best when I can talk about something that I'm passionate about. And it's hard when I'm really processing my thoughts as I make a video. So it's really good for me to just free flow, and that's what I'm going to do here. So I've gotten some confusion, I think, because I talk about my desire for off-grid living. So I want to talk a little bit about what off-grid living is, why I like it, what's appealing to me about it, what it isn't, some of the lines of where it starts and where it stops. So essentially, off-grid living is, there's a power grid. And you're plugged into it right now. You're watching me on a device that was charged from it or is connected to it in some way, and that is the grid. So if you live off the grid, it simply means that you are not connected to that grid. It doesn't mean that you are going without power, or you're going without running water, or you're going without plumbing, or any of that. Now, that isn't to say that you couldn't be lacking all of those things and still off-grid. If you're camping, you're technically off-grid. But I think there's a point where primitive living is sort of fills this little area over to here, and then, you know, there's a little over to here, like maybe camper, RV, van dwelling, something, and then there's more, you know, of an off-grid kind of comfort zone where you probably have all of the features of a normal house and a normal, you know, on the grid house. So if company were to come over, they wouldn't maybe even know you were off grid. Maybe you would, maybe if you are doing, if you're doing rainwater catchment, for example, you maybe want to conserve water. So maybe you have a guest and you kind of have the rule. I have friends that have lived off grid or on septic or something, and you kind of do that. If it's yellow, leave it mellow. If it's brown, flush it down rule. Like, you know, flush your browns and let your yellows kind of do their thing, let a couple build up just to save on water. So you might make somebody aware, hey, we kind of try to limit our showers to 10 minutes or something like that. But as a general rule, you could go to somebody's house that's off grid and not have any clue that they were off the power grid. What appeals to me about it? I like a lot of space, and the reality of it is, if you want to buy 100 acres in Arizona, you can do so for about $40,000. And you can buy a nice 100 acres for $50,000, $60,000. Not, you know, it wouldn't be too difficult. The issue would be that power lines are very expensive to run. So the grid costs a lot of money to A, maintain, and B, to get to very rural areas. So if you live in a big state, or if you're in West Texas, or if you're in Alaska, there's areas that it's just economically non-feasible currently. Not to say that roads won't develop and communities won't spring up. That makes it financially worthwhile for the power companies to run that power. But there are a lot of absolutely amazing pieces of property at insanely good prices that simply don't have power within, say, a mile of them. And a mile's a long way to run power. If you build a house and you wanted to get on the grid, it's going to be very expensive for you to pay to have that power run that mile by the utility company. So it affords you an opportunity to probably live on a piece of property or in a house that you otherwise wouldn't be able to live in or on. I find that very, very appealing. My utilities, and I'll just say this for the video because I have a little bit of an obsession with lowering my monthly expenses and keeping them as low as possible. So my cell phone, insurance, gas, electric, water, all that, definitely under 5, probably 400 or 500. All of my monthly bills, not including food. Every monthly bill I have is probably about the $450 range, depending on the time of year. My electric bill is expensive. I live in Arizona, and while electricity is cheap, we have a lot of cooling days here. So my electric bill is probably about $200 a month. My gas bill is $25 a month. My water bill is about $45 a month. So we're at about $270. Car insurance you're going to be paying whether you're off grid or not, so that doesn't change. Cell phone you're going to be paying whether you're off grid or not. So there's just those few, but you know, that's roughly, let's call it $300 a month that I pay just to get up and function. Now, and just to have running water and plumbing and so on. So you can have, if you live off grid, you can have a septic tank or a composting toilet. Composting toilets are not as gross as somebody might think. You can collect rainwater, or you can have a well. Either one costs you probably $10,000 or $12,000 to set up. They come with different positives and negatives. And you can have solar power. The amazing thing about modern times is solar's gotten really cheap. So you can get solar very easily at 50 cents a watt. You could set up, I mean, you could have solar, you could have wind, or you could have hydro if you had like a river. And those would be able to pretty easily power your own house. With somebody who has a little bit more of a homesteader mentality and can do things themselves, you could probably get your house very functional for $5,000 or $6,000. So if you think about it, if you were to live somewhere off grid and you spent the money to get yourself completely off the grid and independent with all of your monthly expenses, and you were providing this for yourself, you would be able to get a nicer property, a bigger property, and you could probably do so for the same price without the $300 or $400 or $500 a month bill, and you can get yourself something that is yours. And for me, I find a lot of peace in that. Now, I definitely feel like I'm rambling in this video, and I feel like I've gotten off a topic like I always do. So that kind of sucks, but who would want to live off grid? I think anybody that really likes their peace and solitude. I know that I like it because I have a very libertarian type of view, like, you know, you let me do my thing and you do your thing and let's just leave each other alone. So I like having space. I like having the room to have little projects floating around and not have them become intrusive. I love plants. So I would like a very, very large greenhouse. I would live in a greenhouse if I could. And having a lot of land affords me that. I like space. I like distance from my neighbors. I don't want to know when my neighbor's doing laundry or cooking bacon or something. So it affords you that. It also, if you know, if everything in the world goes crazy, you are contained in your bubble. So you're self-contained. You still have your water and your plumbing and your sewer and so on, but nobody can cut it off on you. And your system isn't susceptible to lightning strikes that maybe hit 5 miles away, or a down power line because of a semi-truck hitting it, or something crazy like that. So I find that highly, highly, highly appealing, knowing that I have my little safe space in the world and I can venture out and I can go home to it and it's there and it's waiting for me. Now, I also like to travel, and the same applies to my travel trailer. I almost refer to it more as like a tiny house that's actually functional at being moved, because most tiny houses on wheels are not. I'm not a big tiny house on wheel fan. I prefer small houses, is what I would say. Optimized space and a small house. But with the trailer that I'm building, I'm going to have 1,300 watts of solar on the roof. So I should probably on the average day collect about 4 kilowatts of power, which is a decent amount of power. I could power 40 100-watt light bulbs for an hour with that much with 4 kilowatts of power. So it's a decent amount of power. It's more than enough to run an air conditioner for a short amount of time, let's say 2 or 3 hours. If you want to sleep in a little bit later, it's enough time. You could run a toaster oven for an hour and make some brownies. You can run a chest freezer. You can basically run most of the things in your life as long as you're conscientious about it. I'm going to have running water. I'm going to have propane. I'm going to have a toaster oven, like I mentioned. I'll have sous vide because I love sous vide. I'm going to have a chest freezer. I'm going to have a propane tankless hot water heater, so I can take as long as showers as I want. And while I'm at it, I'm going to touch on propane for a second, because as being on propane, being off-grid, it's not. I don't consider, if you need to have the grid come to you and make deliveries, you could power your house with a generator, propane, things like that. But unless you can sustain it yourself, I don't consider it off-grid. So I don't see it as a viable option. Obviously, in a trailer where it's portable and I'm camping and traveling in it, it's a viable option because there's not a lot of other options. But so those are my thoughts on it. That's my Q&A on off-grid living. If you have questions or comments, if you like off-grid living, if you've thought about building a tiny house or wanting to live in a small space, or please comment below. And last thing, being a minimalist is not the same as off-grid living. It could, of course it could be, and minimalists, it might really appeal to more of an off-grid lifestyle, but they're really not the same thing. I think sometimes people confuse them, but I would love to hear your thoughts, like I said, and that's it on this video. Wait,